on this book, Tried by War, a fairly typical example, I write out the whole book, 10 chapters in longhand. It took me, several months to complete that. And then I will go back through it carefully, making corrections, revisions in longhand on the page itself. And then I will sit down and hammer out a second draft, probably making further changes and corrections. But most of these changes and corrections that I do in subsequent drafts are relatively minor. Unlike some of my friends and colleagues who rewrite and rewrite extensively, I have discovered over time that while the final version of anything I write is much more polished and grammatically sound, I hope, than the first draft, the basic infrastructure of my first draft survives pretty much unchanged until the end. I will add new stuff sometimes because I discover in reading over the material that there's a hole here I need to fill. Or when I send what is really, I guess, a third draft into my publisher, the editor will come back and say, well, this is fine, but I'd like to know more about such and such. That happened with this book. My editor at Penguin Books had some very good suggestions, and I had finished and sent in what I hoped was a final draft by about Thanksgiving last year. And he came back a couple weeks later. He was very quick about it and made several suggestions. And so I thought these were really good suggestions, and I added quite a bit of material, maybe another 15 or 20 pages in several different parts of the book. Sent it in to him the week between Christmas and New Year's. So that kind of thing has happened with previous books too. Getting good editorial help or suggestions from colleagues whom I asked to read the manuscript. In this case, a couple of friends and colleagues read the manuscript, and they corrected some errors and made some useful suggestions too. This was a state of the art as of about 1970. An old Olympia typewriter. I've written most of my books on this typewriter, or the ones that I've done since 1970. 71, somewhere. No, not since the 1980s, actually. I bought it secondhand in the 1980s. Once I get going, I type better and more accurately than the example I just showed you right there. It takes a little while to get into the rhythm of it. But I'll type from a longhand draft sitting right here and try to put together a second draft, and then eventually a final draft that has some. When I'm writing shorter pieces, reviews of books, sometimes shorter essays, I'll do it on the computer that I have in the office. But I still feel more at home using the typewriter for longer pieces. Don't know why. It's just something I got used to, and I like the rhythm of the thing.
Thank you.
The beginning is not only the most important part of a book, I think, because it's what draws the reader in, but it's also the most difficult to write, because you have to get it correctly, you have to get it right. So I think about it quite a bit before I actually sit down to write it, and thinking about it might not be right here. It might be when I'm walking over to the store to do some errands, or it might be when I'm just maybe sitting around relaxing. It could be anything, but it sort of goes through my mind, and eventually I come up with a general idea of how I want to start this book, or it might be a chapter. The same thing tends to be true for each chapter, or maybe even each section within a chapter. The beginning is the hardest thing to do, but in some ways it's the most important thing, and I do have to think about it quite a bit before I say, all right, this is what I want to do. Then I sit down, and the actual formulation of the sentence is something that I do as I'm thinking about it. Sometimes I'll start a sentence not knowing precisely how it's going to end. But the actual process of putting down the first clause or the first few words of the sentence, something clicks in my head and said, okay, this is the right way to do it. So writing will beget more writing. And I think that that's probably true of most authors, that that writing helps to clarify their thinking, and that thinking then leads to clarification of the next sentence or the next paragraph that they want to do.
The photo section in the book, do you have some say in that? Do you work on that at all?
Mm-hmm. I had an entire say of that. I selected all of those images. I worked with the editor on it, and he suggested 2 or 3 things that I hadn't come up with and the first time through, and so I scrambled around and found them.
How much time do you put into that, and when does that start?
Well, it starts after the book has been accepted and is in the process of being copy edited. The editor at Penguin said, okay, we want to have a certain number of illustrations. And so I set forth a list of the principal figures in this book, individuals, and went to basically to the Library of Congress website for most of them. I also had, from previous research, 8x10 glossies of some of these things.
How about the cover image?
That's a famous photograph of Lincoln visiting the Army of the Potomac 2 weeks after the Battle of Antietam at the headquarters of one of George B. McClellan's corps commanders near the battlefield. And on the right is Lincoln, who towers over all of the other officers, and he is facing General McClellan on the left. It's a kind of classic photograph.
Did you choose it?
I chose it. I was just down in Gettysburg a little while ago, and I think this is a kind of postcard that we picked up there. And it's a famous photograph of Lincoln with Tad. And also picked up this photograph of Lincoln's dog, which I had never seen before. So I thought, well, these would be 2 interesting pictures actually to put up right here near the Lincoln papers. This is one of my favorite pictures of Lincoln. It's probably everybody's favorite picture, and the one unique thing about it is the only photograph of Lincoln actually wearing reading glasses.
Did you know you can view Book TV programs online? Go to booktv.org, type the name of the author, book, or subject into the search area in the upper left-hand corner of the page. Select the Watch link. Now you can view the entire program. You might also explore the Recently on Book TV box or the Featured Programs box to find and view recent and featured programs.